In this video, I'm going to share with you 3 words that you need to understand and fully embrace to master fundraising. If you're serious about raising funding for your startup, no matter which stage, you need to understand these 3 words. And these aren't the most common words that you might expect. Words like traction or product market fit. We're going to take those for granted. These are different words, and I want to give you a little insight on what has helped me master fundraising. Not to say that I'm the best at fundraising in the world, but I've done pretty good if you know my background. Welcome to Founder Friday. This is where I just talk directly to you out there, part of this community, and we just get very real about what it takes to be a successful founder, especially if you are raising capital at an early stage. My name is Ed Kang. If we've met before, nice to see you again. Use the chapter marker to jump ahead to the video. I made it as easy as possible for you to get right into the good stuff. If we haven't met, I'm a 7-time funded founder with 2 exits. It's just a fancy way of saying I failed a bunch of times to your benefit. And I use videos like this and my channel to try and help early stage founders avoid some of the catastrophic mistakes that I've made, especially if you're fundraising. Not to say you're not going to make mistakes, but it's hard enough as it is. So let's try to make your life a little bit easier. I'm also the Chief Strategy Officer for Startups.com. I advise founders every single day. We help them raise money. I'm on the front lines of seeing how investors are responding and how founders are raising capital today. I myself have raised over $100 million for my startups, other startups, as well as startup funds, and my team has raised over $750 million for startups that have gone on and raised billions. 15 of them actually went public. So we've got pretty good track record to talk about startup fundraising. If you're part of startups.com, thank you so much. If not, go check us out. Thank you so much for joining me here at this video. Do the YouTube thing, like, comment, subscribe. Always appreciate the support. Let's jump into the 3 words. The first word is liquidity. This is a technical term. The other words are adaptive terms, but this is a technical one. There's going to be a difference, which you're going to see in just a moment. Liquidity, the word, is so important. It happens on 2 sides of when you're fundraising. The first side is liquidity in the markets, liquidity that the investors have to invest in your startup. Second is liquidity when it comes to an exit. That is when everybody gets their money and everything pays off. It also is the event that creates liquidity to reinvest back in the market. So the liquidity is like a 2-sided coin here, and you have to be able to understand this and speak to it, especially if you're going out and looking at the fundraising environment in any type of economy. Yes, people are wealthy and have assets, but those are not liquid assets. Just because someone is worth $1 billion doesn't mean they can just write you a check for $1 billion, because most likely all that wealth is locked up in illiquid assets. It's not sitting like cash under their mattress. And yes, while investors and VCs may have big portfolios, those are not liquid. They've got stock, ownership, equity inside these companies, but these companies have to go public to return the money, because when they go public, that stock goes out in an initial public offering, and that cash comes back into the coffers of those investors. Then they can go invest somewhere else. But when there's no liquidity, the flow of capital does not happen, and founders get frustrated because they think everybody has liquidity and investors have capital, but they're just not investing in you. But truth be told, I've heard VCs say to me, I want to invest in this company, but we just don't have the funds right now, because their limited partners do not have liquidity, are not loading into the general partners and the main fund is not investing in startups. It's the same thing with angels. If they happen to sell a house or an asset or a company, then they'll have liquidity and they can invest in you. But not only do you have to look at the liquidity in the market and understand when there is high liquidity or low liquidity to adjust your expectations on how a fundraise is going to go, you also have to be able to talk about liquidity and move your startup, once you get that investment, to a liquidity event. That's what that's called. An exit is a liquidity event. Say you sell your startup to Google or Apple. They're going to give you cash. They're giving you liquidity, because up to that point in time, your value has been locked in that startup. It's not something you can just go and get food or buy a car or clothes. You can't do that. You can't pay your mortgage with the equity inside your company. You need liquidity. And therefore, while it's not a good practice to try and build a startup solely for an exit, you must understand when you are talking to investors that they are looking for a liquidity event. Typically, that has to be within 10 years. The other way to get liquidity is to pay dividends. But startup investors can't afford just to get 15, 20% dividends every year on their investment, because they've got a big portfolio and 90% of those startups have already failed, and you need to go 100x or 50x at least to pay back their portfolio. That's the reason working with specific investors, they have exit targets. They need a certain amount of liquidity within those 10 years. And if you don't fall into that category, you're not going to be able to raise from them. What this means, if you want to master fundraising, you need to understand liquidity expectations, what's happening out in the market, and have a clear plan that your startup can grow fast enough in the short term to go unicorn and within 10 years go out public. That means you are going to have to accelerate your growth and be mindful of growth and profitability, because people aren't going to buy your stock in an IPO market if you're not profitable, or at least have a path to profitability. And remember, that liquidity is not yours. That belongs to the market and your investors. If you want to build a startup for your own personal liquidity to be able to put $1 million in your bank account and have it liquid, that you can go spend it on whatever you want at any point in time, don't get investors. Because as soon as you get investors, the expectations go up and the chances of you failing astronomically increase as well. There are a lot of great startups out there that are very liquid. They just produce cash, but not enough cash to warrant a startup investor. And that might be okay for you. Understand liquidity, and therefore you will master fundraising. The next word is rejection. This is an adaptive term. You have to prepare yourself for rejection. Non-stop rejection. It's the name of the game. You will literally talk to 100, 200 investors before you get one or two even remotely interested and ready to go into due diligence. But a lot of founders, and I talk to them every day, and they're part of startups.com, our community, don't handle rejection really well. I can see this. As soon as I give founders some feedback and they start to bristle a little bit and start to get insecure, I can tell they are not ready for the rejection that they're going to experience with investors. Founders even get upset when an investor doesn't respond to their email because they take that as a sign of rejection. That may not be the sign of rejection that you're thinking, but you might as well get used to rejection and act like you're just being rejected by every investor so you can become resilient, you can have that grit, you can persevere and stay in there, because rejection will eat you up from the inside. By the time your startup is even ready for investors, you probably experience rejection from the market, from customers. You have to have a soft heart and thick skin. Soft heart for your customers, empathy, compassion for them to solve their problems, but thick skin if they have a complaint, they give you the feedback that might not be as appropriate or what you were looking for. It might be harsh feedback. You have to have soft heart and thick skin to deal with the rejection. Not only to allow the rejection to bounce off you because you're like wearing this armor, but also the soft heart to be able to adjust to it. But herein lies the challenge. A lot of founders develop that thick skin, but then they develop calluses around their heart. And you can see the way that they come across very bitter and defensive. They're combative or obstinate or not open. That becomes an issue, and investors are going to see that right away. Say this to yourself right now. If I plan to raise startup funding for my startup, I will be rejected umpteen amount of times. Take the number that you think in your head and 10x it. That's how many times you're going to be rejected. And think to yourself, how am I going to handle that rejection? Am I going to just callous myself and get really mean or mad or bitter? Or am I going to have a soft heart and develop a thick skin so it doesn't affect me, doesn't deter me, while at the same time I can process that feedback, especially if it's common feedback or it's a feedback with enough frequency that makes you say, I need to be paying attention to this to stay open. Maybe it's feedback about your blind spots. Handle that rejection with soft heart, thick skin. And like I said, you will master fundraising. And that's what I've had to go through. I've literally pitched hundreds of investors, hundreds, just to have a few checks, a handful of checks that I can count on both my hands. I have had to pitch hundreds of investors. I've gone to Y Combinator and I've been rejected by them multiple times, rejected by other accelerators, rejected by other founders and customers. I've been through it all. So I'm not saying anything that I haven't gone through myself. Get used to rejection. Finally, the last word you need to understand is mindset. Everything rises and falls on your mindset. Mindset is your worldview. It's your perspective. It is how you see everything else. It is what happens internally inside you, not what happens externally. Therefore, you can have a fixed mindset or you can have a growth mindset. This comes from the book Mindset by Dr. Dweck. And this is the book that Satya Nadella had everybody read in Microsoft when he took over to turn around Microsoft. Satya Nadella said, I want to transform our culture from a group of know-it-alls, I know everything, to a group of learn-it-alls. Fixed mindset is when you say, my knowledge is fixed, I cannot grow, I cannot adapt. When you're in a fixed mindset, you have an external locus of control, meaning that you're going to blame everybody else, the conditions, the circumstances out there, for the lack of success that you are experiencing or how you are feeling on the inside. This is different from an internal locus of control where you say to yourself, I control my own destiny. I can learn, I can grow, I can adapt. Remember I said there's technical and adaptive terms. Technical typically happens for conditions outside. It's what you learn, the skills to address external circumstances. You have a technical problem, you have technical skill to solve that problem. Adaptive skills and adaptive mindsets are how you adapt to those external conditions, such as this fundraising environment right now with the lack of liquidity. Think of it like students. Studies have found that students can have an internal locus of control or external locus of control. If it's internal, they say to themselves, my grades are my responsibility. I need to go study. Doesn't matter what's happening out there right now. I can learn, I can grow, I can develop the skills and the intelligence to overcome pretty much anything that's put in my way. But if there's an external locus of control, that's where students start to blame teachers. They didn't help me study hard enough. This program's too hard. This is not fair. I'm not getting the same opportunities. And they found that all the founders of unicorn companies have an internal locus of control. They have this chip on their shoulder saying, I know everything's against me. Even if everything is working against me, my circumstances, I don't have the same opportunity, I'm going to work my tail off and learn how to be a better founder, and it is possible. These studies have shown that if you have an internal locus of control, you're better set up for future success, not only when it comes to external success, but internal success as well, your state of mental health, mental well-being. And that always translates to success in some form of external factor. And this mindset also affects investors because investors are going to see that a mile away. Unfortunately, right now, we have a lot of factors in the society, forces that are telling you it's everybody else's fault. It is the external environment that is oppressing you down. Founders cannot fall into this mentality. And I see you out there. I see some of you founders out there leaving some of these really toxic, crusty comments on social media saying, oh, it's all about privilege and it's all just about getting lucky. It has nothing to do with that. Yes, are privilege and luck a part of the factors of success that can mold and shape you? Yes, 100%. I agree. I'm not taking that away from people who don't have the same opportunities, who are not as lucky. Bad things happen. I get it. But it's your mindset and how you process those circumstances that will separate you from a founder who can fundraise and a founder who is just going to continue to complain that the investors are passing on $1 trillion opportunity. It's everybody else's fault, and just be mad and end up emotionally leaking that bitterness all over the place in the rest of their lives and just be miserable people. And you don't want to be a part of that. Instead, it's your mindset that says, I'm going to be okay with my strengths and celebrate them. At the same time, I'm going to be okay with my weaknesses because I have an open growth mindset, an internal locus of control that I can watch videos like this. I can talk to Ed. I can join the startups.com community, a little bit of plug there, and grow and adapt and develop that resilience and that grit. And grit is how many times you can get knocked down and get back up and still perform. Investors love gritty founders because they know how hard startups can be. So develop those adaptive skills, growth mindset, internal locus of control. Understand, it is about mindset. Mindset is the one thing that'll even the playing field between you and every other founder with all the advantages and the opportunities and all the funding. That's going to help you compete. Liquidity, rejection, mindset. Understand the implications of those 3 words to become a master fundraiser. Look into them. You'll thank me later, and I look forward to your comments. Watch some of these other videos that are put on the screen. We want to share success together. We are in this together. Thanks for hanging out with me at the end of the week or the weekend, whenever you're watching this video. I'll see you in the next Founder Friday.